Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is Left Bank Books welcomes Anthony Award-winning author of Blacktop Wasteland, S.A. Cosby, who will discuss his new crime thriller, Razorblade Tears. Tonight, Cosby will be in conversation with acclaimed mystery author Rachel Howzell Hall. Left Bank Books is St. Louis's oldest independent bookstore. We would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of SA and Rachel, and everyone for their outpouring of love for our bookstore. Left Bank Books offers curbside pickup and delivery to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. We are now open to customers coming into the stores. You can find this incredible book on our front table where I will talk about it as soon as you pick it up. We are very happy to be able to bring our event series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and bring in new thoughts to make the world a better place. We hope that you enjoy this event, and we hope that you support Left Bank Books by purchasing a signed copy for you or for all of your friends at left-bank.com. Sean was so nice to be able to sign these book plates that will go in your book and are available for pickup or for mail out now. Purchasing a signed copy of the book from Left Bank Books allows us to keep our bookstore and staff operating, and it allows us to keep this event series going. So thank you for your support. I am Shane Mullen. I am the events coordinator for Left Bank Books. I help produce our hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. We will be taking questions from you, the audience, towards the end of the event. So you can type your questions as a comment at any point in time throughout the event, and we'll get to those at the end of the hour. And be sure to follow Left Bank Books on Facebook and YouTube to be notified about all of our fantastic virtual events. We have a ton of events lined up for July, packed with fantastic books for readers of all ages. And I will tell you right now, before I talk about this book, you are in for a treat tonight. This is our second time that we have hosted. Sorry, my cat is getting into things. This is the second time that we've been able to host Sean and Rachel, actually. And I am so excited for this conversation. I am calling this book the book of the summer. So hopefully you enjoy it as much as I did. Now, about tonight's book, Razorblade Tears. Michael Connelly calls it superb, cuts right to the heart of the most important questions of our times. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel says a tour de force, poignant, action-packed, and profound. A black father, a white father, two murdered sons, a quest for vengeance. Ike Randolph has been out of jail for 15 years, with not so much as a speeding ticket in all that time. But a black man with cops at the door knows to be afraid. The last thing he expects to hear is that his son Isaiah has been murdered, along with Isaiah's white husband, Derek. Ike has never fully accepted his son, but is devastated by his loss. Derek's father, Buddy Lee, was almost as ashamed of Derek for being gay as Derek was ashamed his father was a criminal. Buddy Lee still has contacts in the underworld, though, and he wants to know who killed his boy. Ike and Buddy Lee, two ex-cons with little else in common other than a criminal past and a love for their dead sons, band together in their desperate desire for revenge. In their quest to do better for their sons in death than they did in life, hardened men like Ike and Buddy Lee will confront their own prejudices about their sons and each other as they rain down vengeance upon those who hurt their boys. Provocative and fast-paced, S.A. Cosby's Razorblade Tears is a story of bloody retribution, heartfelt change, and maybe even redemption. And I will read a blurb from Alex George, the best-selling author of The Paris Hours, who is a dear friend of the store. Gripping and fast-paced, this is an immensely entertaining read. The laconic protagonists, on a mission to avenge their sons' murderers and make amends for their own shortcomings as fathers, must meet some fantastically nasty bad guys, and the results are deeply satisfying. There is a real humanity in the storytelling which elevates this thriller to another league. Highly recommended. And now about tonight's speakers. S.A. Cosby is an Anthony Award-winning writer from Southeastern Virginia. He is the best-selling author of Blacktop Wasteland, a New York Times Review Editor's Choice and Goodreads Choice Awards semifinalist, as well as Brotherhood of the Blade and My Darkest Prayer. When not writing, he is an avid hiker and chess player. And tonight, he will be in conversation with Rachel Howzell Hall. Rachel is the author of the Los Angeles Times Book Prize and Lefty Award nominated And Now She's Gone. and the Anthony Award, Lefty Award, and International Thriller Writers Award nominated They All Fall Down. She also writes the acclaimed Detective Eloise Norton series, including Land of Shadows, Skies of Ash, Trail of Echoes, and City of Saviors. Rachel is also the co-author of The Good Sister with James Patterson, which was included in the New York Times bestseller The Family Lawyer. She lives in Los Angeles, and you can find her at www.rachelhowzell.com and on Twitter at Rachel Howzell. And now, without further ado, if you would please help me in warmly welcoming our incredible guests for the evening. I am so excited to have them here. We have Rachel Howzell Hall and Sean S.A. Cosby. Hello!
Hello!
Greetings and salutations.
Thank you so much. Hey. Thank you, Sean, for inviting us both to come and talk our heads off about books. Word nerds together. Yay.
Well, I'm going to leave you to the conversation. I am so excited for this day. And Sean, congratulations on such a fantastic book. So.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. It is so great to see you, even though it's just virtually. I'm so glad to see you, and I want to congratulate you real quick on These Toxic Things. It is incredibly imaginative and incredibly daring book, and so I always love a book that I read where I always love a book that I read where I sit back and think I could never do this. I don't have the skill set for this, and that's These Toxic Things. So,
oh, thank you. We both say that then about each other's stuff, because I said that about Razorblade too. Just like, well, what the hell? Why am I even doing this? So, thank you very much, and thank you for reading early. And I look forward to doing this whole Chitlin circuit with you for the next 6 months or so. So let's hop into it.
I can't think of anything better.
Yeah. So I'm glad that Shane gave the introduction and read what the book was about, because now we can just hop right into it. So my first question, especially since, I'm Angelino and I love my city and I'm very protective of my city. Let's get location correct, because I've read more than a few times that this story takes place in Mississippi. So please tell the readers, where are your stories located?
My stories are located in the place that's in my heart, the state of Virginia, specifically southeastern Virginia, near the Chesapeake Bay, what some people call the lowlands of Virginia, but it's the place of my birth. It's a place I love. I am an unabashedly proud son of the South. And when I say that with no irony, because the South for too long has been viewed as the sole provenance of Confederate apologists, and it could be anything. Nothing is further from the truth. The South is the home of indigenous people, of Black people, of Asian people, of Hispanic people. People of all descents have found their way to the South. It is, in a microcosm, what the United States was and what it became, and the best and worst parts of that dream that manifests itself so viciously and violently at sometimes, but also so beautifully and so intricately. And so, yes, the story takes place in Virginia.
Yeah. What was the hardest thing to write about when you were talking about Virginia? And we all have our conceptions and prejudices and bias towards the South, why this place? Are you going to keep writing stories in Virginia, or do you think you're going to expand? What is so special about Virginia that, other than you being born there and it being, one of the original 13 colonies and the bad history, what is it that makes these stories that you write, they can only happen in Virginia? You know what I mean?
I think Virginia at this place and this time is uniquely positioned to tell stories of change and transformation. Virginia used to be a reliably Republican state. It's the home of the former capital of the Confederacy. And I think it is a really great window and prism to what's changing across the country. And it's a tale of two states, just like our country is a tale of two countries. Northern Virginia is incredibly progressive, technologically based on as far as the economy goes. And rural Virginia is still agrarian based. It's still rural Virginia. A lot of farmland, a lot of corn fields and soybean fields in that part of the state. And so every election cycle, you see these two halves of the state bumping against each other. But also, when the cameras of the nation aren't on the state, you see that in the streets. I live in a small town. I live in a town of 8,000 people. And in that small town, there's a multitude of different types of Southerners. There's your hipster, natural, agrarian, throwback Southerner. There is your far-right, conservative, neo-Confederate apologist Southerner. There's your African-American Southerner who, embraces the Pentecostal church and the soul food dinners and the spirit and the ethos of the South that's expressed through blues music and expressed through literature like Ernest J. Gaines and Zora Neale Hurston. And so for me, even if I didn't live in Virginia, it's still an endlessly fascinating place to write a story about change. And I am ultimately obsessed with change. What can we change? What causes us to even consider change? And so there are numerous stories that I wish and hope that I get a chance to tell that are germane to the place where, my mama popped me out.
Yeah. So, okay. It takes me about 9 months to write a book. And this is all in between, working a day job and being a mom and a wife. So when I get up at 4:40 in the morning, I have to love what I'm about to write because, I'm up. Why am I up at 4:40 in the morning trying to get my own writing in? So I choose my stories very carefully. And I have a reason for why I'm choosing a story and spending all this time and 90,000 words and countless drafts writing this story. Why, for you, why Razorblade Tears? Why the story about a gay couple and their dads when there's so many other stories to tell? What's going on with you right now that you decided I'm going to spend my precious moments writing this story?
All right. So first of all, I admire you getting up at 4:00 in the morning because I'm the exact opposite. I'm a night owl. I wait until everybody else is going to bed, and that's when I write. That's my time to enter my fantasy world. But there was an actual event that made me think about this. There was a couple things. I have a friend who is about my age, so he's 40, and and he hadn't come out to his parents. And this is somebody I went to school with, somebody I grew up with, one of my kindergarten homies. And he finally came out about 5 years ago, and it didn't go well. And we were talking about it afterwards, and he said, I'll never forget it. He said, if I was a hairdresser or I was a choir director, they wouldn't care. He said, but because I'm neither one of those things, I'm an abomination. And it stuck with me. And it really clicked something in my head where I wanted to talk about the parallel dichotomous struggle of African-American civil rights and the LGBTQ plus strive for civil rights, and how there is, again, being a writer is making up stories and telling lies to find the truth. And the truth is there is a strong streak of homophobia in Black and African-American communities, especially in the South. Oh, yeah. And I wanted to talk about that and how that it's just so ridiculous to me, because the search for African-American civil rights and the search for LGBTQ plus rights intersects all the time. One of our greatest writers, our greatest people of letters is a gay man, James Baldwin, and a gay Black man. And I really wanted to talk about how that sort of way that people compartmentalize that in the African-American community, while also talking about it as a whole in rural communities, how rural communities can be incredibly intolerant, incredibly homophobic. But I didn't want to step on somebody else's toes, so to speak. I didn't want to tell it from the point of view of an LGBTQ character because I felt like, that's somebody else's story to tell at this moment in time. For me, the people I want to reach are people like Ike and Buddy Lee. Those are the people I want to reach and tell them and make them realize love is love. It doesn't matter who your child loves as long as that person is treating them with respect. And so for me, I'm like you, I became obsessed with the story. It was something I felt like I had to write. It was difficult. It was very difficult. It was probably my most difficult book because I was really doing my hard work to get it right.
Yeah. Yeah. I know because like you just said, it burrows in your head when it becomes a part of you and you think about it all the time and you get emotionally connected to these people and to these situations. For you, which part of the book made you the most emotional? What either hurt or was too painful that you hated writing it or shocked you? What part of the book, had that kind of visceral reaction when you either wrote it or edited it or, what interacted with it in some way?
There are two parts that did that to me. The first one is the second chapter where the character of Ike, the black father, is sitting in his house and he's drinking a rum on the rocks and he's ruminating on how he wasted so much time not accepting his son for who he is, for allowing his son's sexuality, which is a part of his son, be an obstacle to a relationship with that son. And that was hard to write because, I write a lot about broken men and fathers and sons because I had a difficult relationship with my dad. And I can't even imagine how much more difficult that would have been if he didn't love me, because if I had been gay. It was hard enough just trying to get past our own toxicity and tragic masculinity to form a relationship. I can't imagine what it would have felt like to realize that my father doesn't love me because of who I am. I didn't have that. My father and I had our problems, but it wasn't because of that. And so writing that scene was very difficult. And then without any spoilers, writing the end. The end was very tough because it's a journey. And sometimes it's not about the journey, it's about the destination, but sometimes the destination is difficult to arrive at. And that was very difficult for me.
Yeah. I sometimes torture myself and I go on to some sites and read reviews. And I do that for my book. But I also do that for my friends' books to see, what are people saying? And, I look at the negative things too. And, there are some comments that say, like for my book and for yours, just how triggering this is and to stay away because it's triggering and authors need to be careful because you trigger readers. And my thoughts on this are kind of like what you just said. I'm triggered by it. I choose to, my therapy is writing this out. I have never been much of a big talker. I was always the kid in the book and writing in journals to try and figure this out. And so when you say it's triggering for you, it's triggering for me. I'm just working it out and you get to read how I'm working it out. How do you feel about comments like that? Because there is violence there. There are all the words you're not supposed to say. All of it, it's naked in that way. What's your thought on triggering readers?
I think it's twofold. For me, I really did my best to create a back flap that let people know what they're getting themselves into. I feel like if you read the back cover synopsis of Razorblade Tears and you don't realize, we use words like bloody violence and vengeance and retribution and, two men of the apocalypse, and it is very obvious that this is a very violent book. It's a crime novel. So I feel like on one part, maybe you should be aware of what you're getting yourself into. That being said, if somebody gets into the book and they read it and they feel like it's triggering or it's too hard for them, I understand that. That's not my place to judge you. But I would say as the author, maybe you're not in a place where you're ready to read a book like this. I've read a few of those bad reviews and a few of those negative reviews, and I always come away from the feeling that this is more about the person that read it than the book itself. That there's something going on with that person that is very painful for them, and I have sympathy for that. And so maybe this isn't a book for you to read at this time, because it's someone who comes to the book who maybe doesn't have that emotional baggage. They can see what the point of the book is. Much like my previous works, everybody in Razorblade Tears who uses a derogatory term for LGBTQ people gets their ass handed to them. They are fed their teeth because that doesn't happen enough in real life. And so for me, it's a catharsis, because just like when somebody uses the N-word in my books, eventually they're gonna eat a fist. And so I do that on purpose because I know how much that hurts people. I know how emotionally scarring that can be. And so for me as a writer, I want to give somebody a little bit of catharsis for a moment that, sometimes the world does end up on the right side of things. And people who talk like that and think like that and act like that and do violence against people just because of who they are, sometimes they end up, chopped up in a wood chipper. So I think that's the only answer I can give.
Well, it's interesting. One of my books, someone wrote in a review that this isn't Christian fiction. And I'm like, did I ever say that? What asterisk did she see that said Christian fiction? But that's the question, because both of us were raised in the church, right? And so I know as someone who writes what I write, first of all, for some, I was raised Seventh-day Adventist. And for some, fiction basically is a sin. But I'm always like, Jesus, parables. So there you go. But it's also, how you, I don't know I think Pentecostals far more tight than Adventists are in some ways. How did you be okay with it? How did you move past what you were raised to do and raised to believe, to write the violence, to write the words, to write even the situations, to write fiction even? What did you do to reconcile that?
I was raised in a Pentecostal church. We were just one step away from snake handlers. I grew up in a church where people routinely caught the Holy Ghost and were able to do backflips and splits, and people would get hands laid on them and fall out. And we had modesty cloths for people when they fell out on the floor. And I've waved a mini church fan in my life to bring somebody back around. But for me, ultimately, I don't talk about my religion a lot because I'm pretty much agnostic these days. But for me, writing is my testimony. It's my ministry. I get choked up thinking about it. It's the thing I feel like I've been put on earth to do. It's the gift that I've been given. And so I know, right? Preach. And so for me, I had people in my community, people in my church that I love dearly who were like, "Oh, I can't believe you're writing this." Even my mom passed away not too long ago. Yeah. Even my mom was a little concerned about it. But once she actually read My Darkest Prayer and Blacktop Wasteland, she understood what I was trying to do, that ultimately these are stories of human frailty, and to quote the late, great Jonathan Edwards, we're all sinners in the hands of an angry God. Yeah. And how do you reconcile that? And how do you deal with that as flesh and bone? And so it was difficult, but ultimately I was able to resolve it with, it's like the story, the story of Daniel in the Lion's Den. I can't be afraid because I know this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Yes. Oh no, but it's a part of the African-American experience and how we were raised. And I mentioned to you earlier that I watched Summer of Soul, which is on Hulu now. Everybody watched Summer of Soul, and High on the Hog also. But
Yes.
it was Black
Yes.
Music Festival in Harlem in summer '69. And, you know, you have Sly and the Family Stone on one hand and Mavis Staples and the Staples Singers on the other. And how that is not surprising to anyone, mostly who's Black, whether you're churched or not. That's just a part of your composition, who you are. And I noticed, you know, in your books, the characters do tend to be agnostic. Even the wives don't go to church, and which made me happy because there's always that kind of stereotype. Well, she's going to service and I'm home watching, you know, football. But
Right.
how
Right.
do you think that you're going to get to addressing any of the church stuff, and how the church in some ways has rescued us, but at the same time, it's kind of kept us back in some ways?
It is so crazy that you asked that, because the thing I'm working on right now is directly related to that. I'm working on something right now, a story tentatively titled "All the Sinners Bleed," and it's about the first Black sheriff in a small southern town. And the story opens with a murder, a shooting at a school. A beloved white school teacher is killed. And during the course of the investigation, the sheriff finds out that the school teacher was involved with two other folks as a trio of serial killers. And they were using the small town as their dumping ground. But it's also about religion and how religion impacts the Black and white Southern communities, and how it can be a place of salvation, but also a place of incredible hypocrisy. And so, yeah, I'm definitely working on it. One of the main characters is in a cultish Pentecostal church. My main character, the sheriff, you know, his father converted to a very strict, what we call down here the holiness church. He converted to that when his wife died. She died from a rare disease, and in true Southern Gothic tradition, it's a disease that's physically debilitating, and physically it changed her appearance. And so my main character, the sheriff, Titus Crown is his nickname. He's agnostic, but he's that agnostic that still goes to church because his daddy wants him to go. You know, and he don't want to disappoint his daddy on Sunday. And so it's definitely talking about that idea of how church, like I said, it is this anchor for so many people, but it's also an anchor can drown you. And it's definitely talking about that and what that does to people. You know, again, I grew up in a small town of 8,000 people. We have 23 churches. And I just want to talk about that in the book. I want to analyze that and dissect that. Wow, there's so many churches. Malcolm X said the most segregated day of the week in America is church on Sunday. And I definitely want to talk about all of that. And so that's what I'm working on. So it's a serial killer book, and it's a book about religion, and it's also a book about police violence. So, but yeah, I definitely want to address that, because I feel like I'm at the point in my career, and it feels weird saying that, but I'm at the point in my career where I'm emotionally ready to tackle that. Again, I grew up in a Pentecostal church. My grandfather was a chairman of the deacon and deaconess board. My mama sang on the church choir and was a member of the Pastors Aid Society until she passed. I was a junior minister. We used to have junior church. So I was a junior minister in my church. I used to do sermons on every fourth Sunday. I mean, and so church has just been this incredibly large part of my life. But at the same time, I also went to a church where at one point we had a minister who was sleeping with 3 or 4 of the wives in the congregation. And so, again, that saint and sinner mentality that exists within the walls of that consecrated sanctuary is something that I definitely want to tackle.
Oh, yeah. No, and that's the wonderful thing about being a crime writer, because all the things that like piss you off and have pissed you off since you were little, you get to kind of like return to that and say, what about that? What the hell was that? And I know for me, every book I read is, what the hell is that about? So I totally get it, and I'm looking forward to getting to all those stories. So, a fun question: you paint incredibly vivid scenes. If there was one scene in the book, in Razorblade Tears, that you could see in real life, what would that have been? Like, you're like there, and it's like, oh my God, this is happening.
I want to see. It sounds horrible, but I want to see the standoff in Ike's office. Ike runs a landscaping business, and he has an office that he's renting, where he keeps his landscaping equipment and his, he's got his piles of dirt and sod and soil in the back, and his trucks are there, and he's, it's like this metal building, and there's these bikers who come to confront him, and they don't take him seriously, to the point that they don't bring guns. They bring weapons. They bring pipes and chains and sawed off pool sticks, but they don't bring weapons because they don't see him as a real threat. And he turns the tables on them in a way that I thought at the time when I wrote it was pretty cool. And now that I've listened to an audiobook, it is pretty cool. So I would love to see that scene in real life. And there's also a surprise twist to that scene. So I would love to see it, because I think, and this is, I think a lot of times in crime fiction, when you have an African-American male character, unless it's Walter Mosley or one of your books or something by Kelly or somebody, a lot of times the African-American male character is relegated to the benevolent sociopathic sidekick. And they're not the ones that are on stage, center stage. And to see him stand up to 5 very dangerous men with nothing but a machete, I'd love to see that come to life.
Yeah. Do you have any moments? Oh, and quickly, I was kind of shook when you said rolling 80s, because I grew up in their neighborhood with rolling 60s, and they would come and shoot up but then my sister started dating a few, so it's like, oh, rolling 80s, I know that. Anyway, going back, do you ever, when you're writing about any kind of people, the bad people, the rolling 80s, the motorcycle gangs, do you ever get scared of, this is weird, scared of like manifesting it in your life, kind of like saying Beetlejuice 3 times or Rumpelstiltskin, and because you're writing about it and now here they are? Does it ever worry you that someone's a reader is gonna tell their cousin, who's gonna tell their baby daddy that, oh, Sean was talking about the rolling 80s, or the redneck gangs, Peckerwood gangs? Does that ever worry you? Is that a girl?
Well,
question?
no, for 2 reasons. No. That's a person question, because I did change it from the rolling 60s to the rolling 80s just to kind of hopefully not take anybody off. And the name of the biker gang in the book is made up. I searched it out to make sure nobody had that name. But that being said, I mean, I'm a Southerner, so I got a little something in the closet. So that's all I'm gonna say about that.
On that note, do you ever go back and read your stuff? Like, I don't go back, besides doing readings, I do not go back and read my stories, because the point of being a writer, you're actively learning. You should never stop learning, and you learn how to write better, to plot better, to do all these things better. And so when you look at your old stuff, you're like, oh, that's embarrassing. Oh, that was awkward. So I try not to. Do you read your stories again?
I do not like to, because I hope that I'm getting better, but I was forced to recently because there's some things happening with my first crime novel, My Darkest Prayer, which, when you're a writer, you finish something, you think, well, that's pretty good. I did the best I could. That's pretty good. There are so many problems with that book that I wish I could correct. And so I'm being forced to read it. And every page that I read, like, oh my God, these are too many similes. Oh, Jesus, too many metaphors. Why did I describe this person that way? Why did I take a page and a half to describe, Lisa Watkins walking through the office of a funeral home? Why did I, and so it's like, but at the same time, at the same time, I am in awe of that particular Sean at that particular time, because it's way better than I thought it was when I was writing it. It's not as good as it could be, but it's way better than I thought it was. I mean, I'm a very pessimistic writer and very self-deprecating. So when I start a project, it usually goes in 3 stages. Oh, this is all right. And then second stage is, oh my God, this is crap. What are words? And the third stage is, well, it's all I got.
Well, the last question I'll ask before we open it up to Q&A is, what do you want readers ultimately to come away with when they read one of your books? Like, what is your mission right now at this point in your career?
I think I want people to understand just how difficult it is to be the best version of yourself, the idealized version of yourself that you have in your mind, when you don't have all the tools to achieve that. I think, somebody called me, and I can't remember who it was, and I don't want to say it because I can't remember the right person, but somebody told me over drinks before COVID started that they call me the bard of broken men. And I think there's some truth to that. Because I do write a lot about broken men. I write about very toxic father-son relationships, family relationships that are on the cusp of being pathological. But I think I write about that a lot because I grew up around a lot of good men who didn't have the tools to articulate that goodness. They didn't know how to communicate what was in their hearts. And so they would act out. I grew up behind a shot house, I grew up behind a bar. We call it a shot house because it didn't have a liquor license. So I had uncles. I was 12 and 13 going out, walking through the path in the woods to go out to the shot house. And I would see my uncles that I loved and still love, the ones that are still with us. And these were men who worked hard. They worked jobs on the road doing transportation, construction, or they worked at sawmills, or they worked on fishing boats, pulling crab pots in by the thousands. And so these were physically tough guys, but really emotionally fragile. I remember watching my uncle sit in the corner of a bar and cry in his beer because the woman that he loved had moved on. And he never physically attacked that woman. He never went to put his hands on her, but he sure beat the shit out of that dude she was talking to. And I remember as a kid feeling that exhilaration of visceral reaction at the moment, but then later feeling really bad for my uncle. I felt sorry for him. Instead of fighting that guy, I wish that he could have gone to that woman and said, I still love you. I've made mistakes. Give me another chance. But he didn't know how to do it. And so for me, I feel like I want people to understand that idea that it's hard to be the best version of yourself when you can't articulate it. And I feel like I'm telling the stories of those kinds of people because those are the people that can't tell that story for themselves.
Wow. So Shane, do we have some questions? I love that, John. That's awesome. That's awesome.
I think that kind of sums up like kind of why I get so attached to your books, because I am nothing like I could be further away from what your characters are, or your main characters at least. And I still find so much understanding and so much depth and compassion for them. Your ability to write these characters that are, it's just phenomenal. So thank you. Those were that
thank
last question really kind of threw me. I was like, whoa, that's causing some emotions.
That's what we do.
I know. I know.
Trying to work it all out. Like I was saying, we are always trying to work it out. And those tend to be, for me, the best stories because they're meaningful. They touch you because they've touched us. So There you go.
Yeah. Both DL and I really want the book that you're working on like now. So if you could make that happen, just we'll give you our email. It's fine. Just as you're writing it, just send it along.
Like a serialized novel.
Yeah.
I'm working as fast as I can.
You should start a subscription service where you just like, here you get to read my like drafted work as I put it out.
Yeah.
Help me write this book. Like you read it, tell me what's good. Like DL agrees. So yeah. So my question for you, I think, Rachel, you honestly asked every single question that I had planned for the evening.
Oh.
Like I was like, everything that I wanted to ask, like, why the story? Why now? I wanted to ask, like, do you feel like as a writer, like you were writing this book at the right time, which I think that you asked that and answered that. And I think that, you've done a great job, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now I'm going to ask oddball questions while the audience, because we have a lot of comments, but we want some more questions from the audience. So as a writer and as someone who is very inspired by your kind of surroundings, I'm wondering if you have killed someone in the pages of your book that you actually know. Whether or not they are like you wrote them as that. Like you're just like, oops, I think I just killed someone.
They got dead.
I have not killed someone, but I have had someone get their ass kicked in the pages of a book. There's my first book, Darkest Prayer. There's a scene that's a flashback for my main character when he's on a school bus, and one of the people on the school bus pours a bottle of urine on his head, and he fights him. He beats the living crap out of them. And that was definitely inspired by someone that shall remain nameless, who was a big bully in school. And I finally had to give them their comeuppance. And so I definitely put that in the book. And that was probably my favorite piece that I've ever written. So
I'm always worried. I have several friends that are mystery writers, and one has named a character after me, like first and last name, but I cannot reveal because I play a crucial part in the ending of that book. But you know the author, your friends. And then another author like killed me off before the book even began. Like I was like, oh, I don't know what that says.
Are they stuck?
I thought we were friends. But I was very honored. So, yes. I don't know what their feelings are towards me. I love them still. So I'm wondering.
I did that with
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was a part of the. I was going to say I was a part of the sequel to the Killing Dan Malman collection by Kate and Dan Malman. Was a charity anthology, and so in the sequel, I killed off a bunch of my fellow writer friends that all knew Dan, and so in my story, I killed a bunch of them off like in one fell swoop. So I definitely understand the thrill that comes with that. But anyway,
so you have killed off people that you know. Like to answer my question, yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
But I don't count that one because I really like those people. But
I think you can kill people that you really like, especially when you're a fiction author. It's an homage.
Yeah, an homage.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm curious what you are. So I'm calling this the Summer of Razorblade Tears because I think this book is absolutely phenomenal. I'm wondering what your big book of the summer is.
Oh man. Well, I mentioned earlier that I love Rachel's book that's coming out, These Toxic Things. It's an incredible novel. It's a book that I like I said, I I know I couldn't write it. I don't have the skill set to write that way. And you do a lot of interesting, I wouldn't say risky, but you're taking chances in that book that I don't think I have the guts to do. So, not the least of all being the digital virtual scrapbooking. I've never would have come up with that idea. Never. You could have put me in a time locked room for a million years, and I never would have thought of that. So that's one that's that would never cross my brain. It's like somebody could come up to me and put a gun to my head and like, come on, an idea about scrapbooking. And like, I don't know, pull the trigger, and then I can do for you. So that's one.
Thank you,
another book that's coming, or actually that's, you're welcome, sis. Another book that's out, I've got it, that I think is an instant classic, and it is the best type of twisty domestic thriller. It's the best domestic thriller I've read since Jennifer Hilliard's Jar of Hearts. It's P.J. Vernon's Bathhouse. That book, oh my God. Again, a book that just grabs you from the first chapter and won't let you go. And I said it earlier on Twitter. I said, it's like reading this book is like sitting on your front porch and eavesdropping to your next door neighbors having an argument while you're drinking some really good Prosecco wine, and you've got like Jeff Buckley playing Lover Should Have Come Over in the background, and you're listening to these people argue, and you're getting this visceral thrill, and then one of them pulls out a knife. That's what the experience of reading that book is like. And and he sustains it through the whole book. And it's like every time I turn the page, and I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What the hell is going on? Oh my God, I can't believe it. So that's one of the books of the summer for me. I love that book. And I've met PJ before. I count him as a friend. He's in the acknowledgments at the end of Razorblade Tears. He's an incredible person, an incredible writer. His sentence structure is so elegant. It's like a rapier. It really is. He's just an incredible crafts person when it comes to writing books. So that's a book that's out now. If you have the opportunity, please get it. I think it's incredible. I'm just starting Riley Sager's Survive the Night. And I have to admit, this is the first book by Riley that I've read. But he was nice enough to invite me to be a part of his movie watch along a few weeks ago. He and a couple other writers watched Jaws. We did like a Mystery Science Theater 3000 watch along, which was so much fun. It was amazing. We're all going to meet up one day. Yes, we're all going to meet up one day and have the Roy Scheider pour, which is reference that scene in Jaws where Roy Scheider is pouring wine for his wife and for Richard Dreyfuss's character, and he pours each of them like a drop, and then he pours himself like a full glass. That's the Scheider pour, so that's what I'm going to ask for. Yes, I'm going to ask for that. I told Riley, whenever we meet up, we're going to ask for that at the bar when we get to the bar and have a bartender pour it. Give me the Scheider pour.
Yeah.
But Survive the Night is, again, a book I wouldn't have thought of to write, but I'm fascinated with what he does with it. So that's another great book that's out. The last one right now that I've read, The Other Black Girl. Oh my God, that is such a good book. That is such a good book. So incredible, so searing and insightful. Oh my God, that is such a good book. Anybody who wants to read about, if you like inner office politics and you like that sort of corporate domestic thriller, also with a heavy dose of existential dread and philosophical debate, get The Other Black Girl. It is so good. And because also for me, I know so many women, Black women in my life who have gone through that, who have experienced that story. Maybe not to the extent of the protagonist of the book, but definitely have gone through. I love that Chris Rock joke where he says his wife came home and like, she's like, oh, that girl is trying to destroy me at the office. And Chris Rock is like, you work at Office Max. What is she doing, hiding your pencils? And it's like, but we don't understand the dynamic that exists in that sort of sphere. So I'm so glad that she wrote that book. And it's such a great novel. I loved it. So those are my three.
Do you have any, Rachel, to add?
He said all of those. I am looking forward to Oh God, I forgot her last name. Wanda Coleman. Wanda Coleman. She wrote all her little secrets. It's a stunning red cover. I blurbed it. It's coming out in October, I believe. One of my favorite reads has been, and I don't think it's in America yet, published yet, Catriona Ward's The House on Needless Street, which is one of the most trippy, haunting, disturbing, beautifully crafted books that I'm like, how did you do that? What is that trick? I want to read this again 6 times forensically and figure out how you did this trick. So those two, and of course, I read Sean's book. Fortunately, there has been a great burst of great writing, in the last few years, and a lot of it, it's more diverse than it's ever been. That's a positivity. That's a positive in our genre. So I have lots of books to get to, lots and lots. But I'm taking on vacation. I go on vacation, real vacation next week, and I'm taking Jess Laurie's next book, Litany, with me on vacation. I have PJs loaded on my Kindle, and Laura Lippman's Dream Girl. So those are going to be my Cabo San Lucas reads as I'm drinking rum punch.
Nice.
Yes.
It's Wanda Morris.
Very nice.
Wanda Morris. Thank you.
Comes out in November.
Wanda Coleman was a poet out here in Los Angeles, like our poet laureate for a long time. That's why I always get her confused. It's like Wanda Coleman. She's great. But yes, Wanda Morris.
And I shared a link for that one because that one is absolutely on my list too.
Yes.
And your book, Rachel, comes out in September, and I shared a link for that too. Ooh, I haven't seen a copy yet. I need to get a copy.
I will make sure you get a copy. I will make sure that you get a copy.
Thank you, because it'll be the fall of
yes.
Rachel Howzell.
Toxic things. They're illustrations. They're illustrations.
Yes.
Yeah. The summer of Sean, the fall of Rachel. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
Autumn. Yes, there we go. I'm like, no, I don't like that.
The autumn of Rachel.
Reverse that.
I take it back. Digital erase.
Control Z. Control Z.
If I shake it, it'll undo, right?
Yes.
One thing I did want to talk about, Sean, I think it was kind of with your book, the phrase rural noir kind of was created. And there's like Midwestern noir, which I'm a big fan of a lot of books in that genre, and the rural noir. Like I am from like middle of nowhere, Missouri, and it just encompasses so much of the US. So I'm wondering if you have seen a lot of people from all over the country kind of identifying with what you're writing because of that rural aspect that so many books kind of leave out.
Well, honestly, I think the actual progenitor of that term is Daniel Woodrell, who wrote Winter's Bone, Tomato Red, and a lot of other good books. Yeah, I think he created that or coined that term. But I find that people are way more willing to immerse themselves in that rural noir milieu than I previously thought. I really, when I first started writing books, I didn't know what to write about because I loved crime fiction. I loved the classics. I love Chandler and McDonald, both of them, John D. and Ross. I love Agatha Christie, Dorothy L. Sayers. I love Chester Himes. And everybody I've named wrote stories that took place in a city or an urban area or a metropolis or what have you. There were even Dashiell Hammett with Red Harvest is writing about the outsider coming to this weird town. And so I didn't really discover a lot of writers that were writing about where I was from. And the only people that were writing about the rural South were not classified as crime writers. We're talking about William Faulkner and Flannery O'Connor, Harry Crews and Charles Willeford. Yeah, Eudora Welty. They weren't. Nobody else was writing about that. And I think outside of the South, there was a long period of time where people thought of Southern Gothic as just this, weird surrealness. Where it is. Watch any Tennessee Williams play, and it gets pretty surreal. Suddenly, last summer is dark as hell. But I think for me as a writer, I just didn't know how to fashion a story, and I didn't think people would be interested in it. And when I started reading like 2 books that I read that really made me think I could do it in a way that would be palatable to the audiences as large, I read The Killer Inside Me by Jim Thompson. And I read 3 books. I read The Killer Inside Me by Jim Thompson, which takes place in a small, sleepy southern town, which is as rural as it gets. I read Winter's Bone, which I previously mentioned, by Daniel Woodrell. And I read Country Hardball by Steve Weddle. And those 3 books really made me understand that I could do this. I could make a story that would appeal to people without betraying or condescending to the people that I grew up with. Because I'm, when people meet me, I think sometimes they're like, "Oh, you're quite erudite, and I love listening to you talk." I'm as country as hell. I'm ashy knuckle country right down to my boot, cracking blue crab shells, and and I used to hunt rabbits and stuff like that as a kid. I climbed magnolia trees and caught crayfish and went swimming in the creek. And I've been to more than one field party. And anybody who's not familiar with the rural area of the country, all a field party is a bunch of people get their trucks together in a half semicircle, turn their headlights on, and we all get like an older drunk to buy us liquor. And it's always in a field or in a pasture somewhere. So invariably somebody might run into a cow. I've tipped more than one cow before. And so being able to bring that experience to people in a way that is hopefully entertaining and elucidating, I didn't think I could do it, but those writers and many more writers like that showed me it was possible. There was a path forward, like Zora Neale Hurston, Ernest J. Gaines, not really a crime writer, but an incredibly nuanced and incredibly intelligent and experimental Southern writer. To me, Ernest J. Gaines is the heir apparent to William Faulkner. He really is. And so everything that you like about Faulkner, you can like about Gaines, and it's a little bit easier to understand. And that's no knock against William Faulkner. I just finished rereading. I just finished rereading Light in August a few days ago. I mean, just I'm actually thinking of going. I'm crossing my fingers. I'm going to BoucherCon, and I'm thinking of getting a tattoo while I'm in Louisiana of that famous Faulkner quote that the past is never dead. It's not even the past. I have other tattoos, so I'm thinking of getting that one done while I'm down there and like in the French Quarter, drunk off of hurricanes. So
yes.
I also speak the language country as hell. I may not appear to, but I know how to speak country as hell.
Yeah. And my mom's from Mobile, Alabama, and mostly, we're all kin. Somebody knows somebody.
Yeah,
it's gonna go back.
Exactly.
We have last question. We have like a minute left, but we can go over if you want. So Karen is asking, what was the trigger for you deciding to become an author? I love reading, but it has never spoken to me to write my own novel.
This is such a beautiful question because it's a tribute to my late mother. So when I was 5 or 6, my mom was still reading stories to me. And my mom loved Greek mythology, but I didn't particularly like it. I wanted her to read scary stories, exciting stories. And so she would read me stories sometimes. And because I am a born smart aleck, and I'm a congenital sarcastic son of a gun, I would complain about the ending of the stories. And my poor mom got to a point where she was so frazzled and so frustrated. She was like, you know what? Just write your own damn story. Just write a story that you can end it anyhow you want. And I remember at 7 years old, I wrote my first story. And it was the story of the gnomes versus the fairies. and the gnomes and the fairies lived in the magnolia tree outside. And there was this huge war. There was betrayal. There was backstabbing. And I wrote it. It was 8 pages in my big spiral notebook. And my mom read it. And she said, "This is terrible. But you wrote it. You finished it. You wanted to finish it. And I'm so proud of you for finishing it." And that's always stuck with me. She was like, because my mom was a very tough lady. She was tough as a $2 steak, let me tell you. And she didn't sugarcoat nothing. She was not a baker. But she told me, she's like, "I don't particularly like this. This is kind of weird, but you finish it, and I'm proud of you for finishing it." And it's always stuck with me because I always hear a voice in my head when I finish something. So that's what made me write. It was my mom being kind of mean to me, but being honest. And I think I look at reviews and critiques the same way. You can be mean to me as long as you're honest, and I don't take it personally.
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
All right. Well, I want to thank you both so much for being here, for doing this event, for writing the books that you do. Like, seriously, big fan here. And to the audience watching, thank you so much for tuning in. Go buy this book if you have not already. Razorblade Tears. You can also buy this book, And Now She's Gone. That's available now. You can pre-order Rachel's next book. Read these fantastic books.
Thank you, Shane, for inviting us. Thank you, Sean, for being here and writing incredible stories about broken people. So hope to see you in New Orleans.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Rachel, for doing this. I can't wait to see you in person. Yes. We can't wait to see you in person. We've got to share a martini. So
yes.
Thank you so much. Y'all have a good night. Gotcha.